On the night of December 5, 1928, thousands of banana workers gathered in the town square of Cienega, Colombia, after weeks of striking against the United Fruit Company for basic demands, a written contract, real wages instead of company vouchers, and a 6-day work week. Families had walked in from surrounding plantations, some carrying children, expecting a peaceful Sunday gathering after Massachusetts. By morning, Colombian soldiers had opened fire on the crowd. Machine guns positioned at the corners of the square, no warning shots, no negotiation, just orders read aloud, and then gunfire. The death toll is still disputed today. Official government records list dozens. Other historical accounts and diplomatic cables describe hundreds. And the massacre became infamous enough to appear fictionalized in one of the most celebrated novels ever written. Verify exact casualty figures. It was not a rebellion, not a war, not even really about politics. It was a fruit company protecting its profit margins, with the full backing of a national army willing to use it against its own citizens. This is the history of the banana, and it is far stranger and darker than anything you'd expect from something you peel without a second thought before breakfast. Here's the second hook, and it's happening right now. A fungus with no known cure is currently spreading through banana farms across the globe, and scientists openly admit they cannot guarantee the banana on your kitchen counter will still exist in its current form 50 years from now. Comment the last banana you ate, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that simple fruit has already gone extinct once before. Long before that massacre, long before any company existed to fight over it, the banana looked nothing like the smooth yellow fruit sitting in grocery stores today. Wild bananas, native to the jungles of Southeast Asia and Papua New Guinea, were packed almost entirely with hard, pea-sized seeds, so dense that eating one meant chewing through mostly seed and fibrous pulp for a tiny amount of actual edible flesh. Archaeological evidence from Papua New Guinea suggests humans were cultivating banana plants as early as 7,000 years ago, among the oldest cultivated crops on the planet. Verify exact date range. But what they were growing barely resembled fruit at all by modern standards. Somewhere in that long process of cultivation, something remarkable happened by pure genetic accident. Certain wild banana plants produced a natural mutation, a sterile hybrid between two wild species, Musa acuminata and Musa balbigiana, that grew fruit without functional seeds at all. Verify exact species names and hybridization details. Normally, a sterile plant is an evolutionary dead end. It cannot reproduce. But early farmers noticed something else about this mutant banana. The flesh was smooth, sweet, and genuinely enjoyable to eat. And even though the plant couldn't grow from seed, it could still be propagated by cutting off a sucker, a small shoot growing from the base of the parent plant, and replanting it elsewhere. Imagine stumbling onto one plant, out of thousands, that suddenly tasted completely different from everything around it, sweet instead of starchy and seed-packed, and realizing the only way to get more of that specific fruit was never to plant a seed again, only ever to cut and replant a piece of the original. Think about what that actually means for a second. Every seedless banana grown from that point forward was not a new individual plant in any meaningful genetic sense. It was a clone, a cutting, a genetically identical copy of the same sterile mutant discovered centuries or millennia earlier. Farmers kept cutting and replanting the same handful of lucky mutations generation after generation, without a single new genetic variation entering the population through sexual reproduction, because sexual reproduction was no longer physically possible for the fruit anymore. In a very real sense, a banana plant growing today and one growing 2,000 years ago, if they trace back to the same original mutation, are technically the same living organism, just endlessly propagated in pieces across time. Buried inside that detail was the most dangerous weakness in the entire banana industry, but it would take thousands of years, a global empire, and one catastrophic agricultural collapse before anyone truly understood the danger they had built into this fruit from the very beginning. A crop with functioning seeds carries natural genetic diversity, meaning some individual plants will always have slightly different resistances to disease, pests, or changing conditions. A crop cloned endlessly from one original plant has none of that. If a threat ever evolved that could kill one banana plant, it could, in theory, kill everyone, everywhere on Earth, all at once, because they were all, genetically speaking, the same individual. Nobody farming bananas 7,000 years ago in Papua New Guinea had any reason to worry about that. They had simply found a fruit sweet enough, filling enough, and easy enough to grow that it was worth the trouble of propagating by hand rather than letting nature handle reproduction the usual way. And no, I'm not making that trade-off up. It's exactly the same bet humans have made with dozens of crops throughout history, choosing a guaranteed good result over an unpredictable natural one, and mostly getting away with it, right up until they didn't. Discovered once that clones still had to travel a very long way from a handful of Pacific islands to become one of the most eaten fruits on the planet. Arab traders moving along established routes through South and Southeast Asia carried banana cultivation westward through India and into the Middle East and East Africa roughly 2,000 years ago, spreading a fruit that thrived in humid, tropical climates almost everywhere it landed. These weren't quick trips. A trader carrying banana suckers overland faced weeks or months of travel through desert and mountain terrain, keeping the fragile cuttings alive with careful watering and shelter from direct sun the entire way, all for a fruit that couldn't even survive the journey as seed, only as a living piece of the original plant. Some linguists trace the English word banana itself back through Portuguese to a West African language, likely Wolof, a small linguistic fingerprint showing exactly which trade networks carried the fruit across the African continent. Verify etymology. The next leg of that journey ties directly into one of history's darkest chapters. Portuguese traders established banana cultivation on islands off the West African coast by the 1400s, and as the transatlantic slave trade expanded over the following centuries, enslaved Africans, forcibly transported across the ocean, carried both banana plants and the specific agricultural knowledge needed to grow them into the Caribbean and Central America. Historical accounts describe enslaved people cultivating small banana plots for their own subsistence on plantations where they had been forced to grow entirely different cash crops for their captors. A small, bitter irony given what the same fruit would eventually become. The fruit that would eventually build a corporate empire spread partly along the same routes and often aboard the same ships, used to transport enslaved human beings. That connection rarely makes it into a banana advertisement, and it should. Once established in Central America and the Caribbean by the 16th century, the banana found something close to a perfect environment: warm year-round temperatures, heavy consistent rainfall, and rich volcanic soil across countries like Honduras, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. Wild banana varieties had taken thousands of years to spread gradually across Asia and Africa through trade and migration. In the Americas, given ideal growing conditions and known natural predators or diseases yet present to challenge it, banana cultivation exploded within a few generations, setting the stage for something nobody in Papua New Guinea could have possibly imagined: an industrial empire built around one cloned, seedless fruit. By the late 1800s, American entrepreneurs traveling through the region had noticed something else too: that this fruit, hardy enough to survive a sea voyage if picked green and ripened en route, could be shipped north in bulk and sold in cities that had never seen a fresh tropical fruit before at any real scale. One early American fruit trader, Lorenzo Dow Baker, reportedly bought a boatload of bananas in Jamaica in 1870 almost on a whim, sold them for a substantial profit back in Massachusetts, and within a few short years had helped build the shipping networks that would later become the backbone of the entire industry. Verify specifics of Baker's early banana trade. None of this happened gradually or gently. The empire arrived fast, backed by American capital, railroads, and, when necessary, private armies, and the story of how that happened explains exactly why a banana massacre in Colombia was even possible in the first place. In 1899, several American fruit companies merged to form the United Fruit Company, and within just a few decades, it had grown into one of the most powerful corporations most people today have never fully learned about in school. By the early 20th century, United Fruit controlled enormous banana plantations across Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Colombia, and beyond, along with the railroads, ports, telegraph lines, and shipping fleets needed to move that fruit to American and European markets before it spoiled. Verify specific acreage and revenue figures. In several of these countries, the company's economic and political influence genuinely rivaled, and sometimes exceeded, the power of the national government itself, controlling more miles of railroad track in some countries than the government did, and often serving as the only reliable telegraph and postal link between remote regions and the capital city. That situation was so common across the region that the term Banana Republic was coined specifically to describe it. a phrase that started as a precise description of one company's political dominance and only later became a generic insult. One of the most influential figures behind that expansion was a Russian-American businessman named Samuel Zemue, nicknamed Sam the Banana Man, who started as a small fruit trader buying overripe bananas cheaply at docks and reselling them fast before they spoiled, and eventually took control of a rival company that later merged into United Fruit. In 1911, Zemue reportedly financed and organized a private mercenary invasion of Honduras, hiring soldiers of fortune, including a notorious American mercenary, to help overthrow the country's government and install a more business-friendly regime willing to grant his company favorable land and tax concessions. Verified details of the 1911 Honduras coup. This wasn't backroom lobbying. It was an armed coup funded by a fruit company against a sovereign nation, and it worked, with the newly installed government granting Zemue's company enormous tax-free land concessions almost immediately afterward. Violence became the pattern, and 1928 in Colombia is where our story began. Banana workers striking for basic labor rights were met not with negotiation but with Colombian troops, deployed at the company's urging, opening fire on a crowd in Cienega's town square. The death toll remains genuinely disputed by historians to this day, but the massacre's scale was significant enough that it became a permanent, dark reference point in Colombian national memory, later immortalized in fictionalized form in Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel, 100 Years of Solitude. Verify specific casualty numbers, which vary widely across sources. United States diplomatic cables from the period reportedly described the company pressuring the Colombian government directly, even hinting at the possibility of American military intervention to protect its interests if the strike wasn't put down. Verify specifics of alleged U.S. diplomatic pressure. Even that wasn't the most consequential intervention the company was involved in. In 1954, the Central Intelligence Agency helped orchestrate a coup in Guatemala against democratically elected President Jacobo Arbenz, an operation with the covert codename Success. Arbenz had proposed land reform that would have redistributed and used farmland, including large uncultivated tracts owned by United Fruit, to landless peasant farmers, with compensation based on the company's own previously declared and suspiciously low tax valuations. United Fruit lobbied aggressively in Washington against the reform, with several officials in the American government at the time holding prior personal or financial ties to the company. Verify specific individual conflicts of interest, and within months, Arbenz had been forced from power by a CIA-backed military operation. A coup whose long-term consequences contributed to decades of civil conflict in Guatemala that followed, a conflict historians estimate eventually claimed well over 100,000 lives across subsequent decades. Verify precise casualty estimates for the broader Guatemalan civil conflict, and the causal chain historians continue to debate. It funded a coup. It backed a massacre. It helped topple an elected government. 3 separate events, 3 separate countries, 1 fruit company connecting all of them. Think about that for a second the next time you see a banana sticker with a smiling cartoon mascot on it. Even the ordinary experience of buying a banana today traces back to systems this company helped build. United Fruit pioneered a standardized color ripeness chart still used across the produce industry, numbering bananas from fully green to fully spotted brown, allowing distributors thousands of miles from any plantation to know exactly how many days a shipment had before it needed to sell. Verify origin of the standardized ripeness chart. It's a small, almost invisible piece of infrastructure, but it's part of why a banana in a store in Chicago or London looks and ripens almost identically to one bought the same week in Berlin or Toronto. Even that cheerful mascot wasn't an accident. Facing growing public criticism of its labor practices by the mid-20th century, the company, later rebranded as Chiquita, launched an aggressive advertising campaign in 1944 built around a cheerful animated banana character and a catchy jingle taught to school children across America, deliberately reshaping public perception of the fruit into something wholesome, fun, and entirely disconnected from plantation politics. Verify exact campaign launch date. It worked remarkably well. Most people humming that jingle today have never once connected it to a massacre, a coup, or a mercenary invasion. That gap between the cheerful sticker and the actual history underneath it is exactly the story this video is trying to close. Here is where that genetic detail from the very beginning of this story finally comes crashing back into the empire built on top of it. Remember, every commercial banana was a clone, propagated from cuttings rather than seeds, meaning entire continents of banana plantations were, genetically speaking, growing the same individual plant over and over again. For decades, that plant was a variety called Gros Michel, prized for its rich flavor, thick protective peel, and excellent durability during long ocean shipping. And by the early 20th century, it was essentially the only banana variety most of the world had ever tasted. Then, in the soil beneath those plantations, a fungus began to spread. Its name is Fusarium oxysporum F. sp. cubans, more commonly known as Panama Disease, and it attacks a banana plant's roots and internal water-carrying tissue, slowly choking the plant to death from the inside, while leaves yellow and wilt above ground, starting at the base and working upward until the entire plant collapses under its own weight. First identified in Central American plantations around the turn of the 20th century, Panama disease found perfect conditions to spread in the exact monoculture farming system the industry depended on entirely. Endless rows of genetically identical, completely defenseless Gros Michel plants, packed together across thousands of acres, with a soil-borne fungus that could persist and spread for decades once established, surviving even after infected plants were destroyed. Early plantation managers, unfamiliar with the disease, reportedly assumed poor drainage or bad soil was to blame for years before scientists correctly identified a fungal pathogen as the actual cause, verified details of early misdiagnosis. There was no cure. There still isn't one today for this type of soil fungus. Plantations tried flooding fields for months at a time, rotating crops, digging drainage trenches, and abandoning infected land entirely. But the fungus simply followed the banana wherever growers replanted it, surviving in dormant spore form in the soil for years, waiting for a new host root to infect. By the 1950s and 1960s, Panama disease had devastated Gros Michel plantations across Central America so thoroughly that United Fruit itself was reportedly forced to abandon vast sections of previously productive farmland, some estimates suggesting the company lost the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars in destroyed cropland over just a few decades. Verify specific financial losses and abandoned acreage figures. Entire towns that had grown up around plantation work watched their local economy collapse as fields that had produced fruit for generations were simply walked away from, left to grow wild again because nothing could be done to save them. The banana that generations of American and European consumers had grown up eating was, quite literally, dying out beneath their feet, everywhere it had ever been planted. The industry scrambled desperately for a replacement, testing dozens of banana varieties from around the world for two critical qualities: resistance to the fungus already wiping out their entire product line, and a taste and shipping durability close enough to Gros Michel that consumers wouldn't simply stop buying bananas altogether. Some historical accounts describe company scientists and growers spending years quietly running side-by-side taste tests and shipping trials, aware that whichever variety they chose would need to fool an entire generation of consumers into accepting a genuinely different fruit as completely normal. Verify specifics of the variety selection process. Eventually, growers settled on a variety called Cavendish, smaller, slightly blander in flavor by most historical accounts, with a thinner peel more prone to bruising during transport, but crucially, resistant to the specific strain of Panama disease that had just destroyed the previous industry standard. Here's the line that explains the entire title of this video. The banana sitting in your kitchen right now, the Cavendish, exists in its current global dominance specifically because Gros Michel nearly went commercially extinct. If Panama disease hadn't wiped out the original industry standard, most of the world might never have widely adopted Cavendish at all. The banana you eat today almost didn't need to exist and only became the world's default fruit because its predecessor was destroyed first. The problem is, it's the same problem all over again. Cavendish bananas are also propagated exclusively by cloning cuttings, exactly like Gros Michel before them. The industry, faced with total collapse, replaced one genetically uniform, disease-vulnerable monoculture with another genetically uniform, disease-vulnerable monoculture, just one that happened to be immune to the specific threat that had just caused the crisis. They did the same thing again, and for a while, it worked perfectly. Sometime in the 1960s, that for a while ended when researchers in Taiwan identified a new strain of the same fungus, one that Cavendish had no natural resistance to whatsoever. Verify exact discovery date and location. Scientists now call it tropical race 4, or TR4, and unlike the original strain that destroyed Gros Michel, this new version can also infect several other banana varieties, making it even more dangerous to the industry's already narrow genetic base. For decades, TR4 remained largely confined to parts of Asia and Australia, contained mostly through strict quarantine and biosecurity measures at affected farms. Farm workers required to disinfect boots and equipment before crossing between fields, a slow, unglamorous defense against something too small to see. Containment held for a while. In 2013, TR4 was confirmed in Mozambique, marking its first documented jump to African soil. Verify. Then, in August 2019, Colombia's agricultural authorities confirmed TR4 had reached Latin America for the first time. Detected in the country's northern banana-growing region, the same general area, incidentally, not far from where that 1928 massacre once took place. Verify exact Colombian detection details and location. The same nightmare that destroyed Gros Michel is now spreading, quietly, through soil, boots, farm equipment, and contaminated water, across the same clonal monoculture that replaced it, and there is still no known cure. Today, bananas represent one of the largest fruit export industries on the planet, with a global trade estimated at well over $25 billion annually. Verify current market size figures, and Cavendish alone accounts for the overwhelming majority, often cited around 95%, of all bananas traded internationally. Verify exact market share percentage. In the United States and United Kingdom, bananas are consistently ranked among the most purchased fresh fruit items in grocery stores, eaten by hundreds of millions of people who have, in most cases, never tasted any variety other than Cavendish in their entire lives. Ask most shoppers what a banana is supposed to taste like, and they will describe Cavendish specifically, without ever realizing they are describing one variety among hundreds that exist worldwide, most of which never leave the regions where they're grown. Near total dependence on one clone is exactly why TR4 spread through Colombia, and its continued presence across parts of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East has triggered genuine alarm within the agricultural science community. Not casual concern, actual emergency-level containment efforts. Colombia declared a national state of emergency specifically over the banana industry following its 2019 TR4 detection, implementing strict quarantine zones, biosecurity checkpoints, and disinfection protocols at affected farms in an attempt to slow the fungus's spread to the country's broader banana-growing regions. Verify specifics of Colombia's emergency response. Trucks entering and leaving affected zones reportedly had to pass through disinfectant baths, and entire farms were placed under movement restrictions rarely seen outside of animal disease outbreaks. Scientists are racing against the clock on multiple fronts. Researchers at the Queensland University of Technology in Australia have spent years developing a genetically modified version of Cavendish engineered specifically to resist TR4, with field trials showing genuinely promising results in infected soil where standard Cavendish plants consistently died. Verify current trial status and results. Other research teams are working to breed entirely new banana hybrids using genetic material from wild, seeded banana relatives, deliberately reintroducing some of the genetic diversity that was lost thousands of years ago when farmers first began cloning that original sterile mutation, essentially trying to undo, carefully and scientifically, the same trade-off their ancestors made without knowing the risk. Both approaches face real, unresolved obstacles. Genetically modified fruit still faces significant regulatory hurdles and consumer skepticism in many major banana importing markets, meaning a scientifically successful GMO Cavendish could still take years, or could fail entirely, to reach approval and acceptance on grocery store shelves. Verify regulatory status across key markets. New hybrid varieties bred from wild relatives, meanwhile, risk changing the flavor, texture, or shipping durability that an entire generation of consumers has come to expect from a normal banana, creating a genuinely difficult marketing problem even if the fruit itself turns out to be perfectly good. The same challenge growers faced generations ago when Cavendish first had to convince the world it deserved to replace Gros Michel. In the meantime, TR4 keeps spreading. It has now been confirmed across parts of Asia, Australia, the Middle East, Mozambique, and Colombia, and agricultural researchers widely acknowledge there is currently no way to fully eradicate the fungus once it establishes itself in a region's soil. Verify current confirmed TR4 locations, as this list continues to change. The honest, uncomfortable answer from most experts is that containment, not elimination, is the only realistic short-term strategy available, buying time for a genetic or agricultural solution that doesn't yet fully exist. There's an uncomfortable historical echo worth sitting with here too. The same overconfidence that assumed Gros Michel was simply the banana, permanent and unshakable, right up until the moment it wasn't, now surrounds Cavendish. Most consumers alive today have never questioned why every banana looks and tastes the same, because they've never had reason to. That kind of quiet, invisible confidence is exactly the condition that made the first collapse so total and so fast once it finally started. Curiously, Gros Michel never fully disappeared. Small quantities are still grown today in parts of Southeast Asia and Africa, mostly for local consumption rather than export, and a handful of specialty importers occasionally bring limited batches to markets willing to pay a premium for a taste of banana history. Verify current Gros Michel availability. People who've tried both varieties side by side often describe Gros Michel as creamier and more intensely flavored than Cavendish, a small, surviving reminder of exactly what the entire industry gave up when it standardized around one replacement clone. Step back far enough, and this stops being a story about one fruit at all. It's the same trade-off that has shaped agriculture for centuries, choosing predictable, easily replicated abundance over unpredictable, resilient diversity. It happened with Ireland's near-total reliance on a single potato variety in the 1840s, a dependence that turned one fungal blight into a famine that killed roughly 1 million people and drove another million to emigrate within just a few years. Verify exact famine casualty and immigration figures. It's happening again right now with citrus crops battling a disease of their own on the other side of the planet. Orange groves in Florida quietly collapsing for reasons most consumers have never heard of. And it has already happened once before, in complete, total, agricultural silence, with the same fruit sitting in your kitchen today. Humans keep making this same bet because, in the short term, it almost always wins. Uniform crops are easier to grow, easier to ship, easier to predict, and easier to sell at scale. A single reliable banana variety, identical from Honduras to the Philippines, is dramatically more profitable to manage than a chaotic patchwork of dozens of slightly different varieties with unpredictable yields and inconsistent flavor. Retailers want a fruit that looks the same in every store, ripens on a predictable schedule, and tastes exactly like what shoppers expect every time they buy it. And monoculture delivers exactly that, reliably, for years, sometimes decades, before anything goes wrong. The math works, right up until a threat evolves that can exploit that exact uniformity, at which point the whole system, built for efficiency rather than resilience, collapses all at once instead of gradually. That's really the core lesson sitting underneath this story. This isn't really a story about a company, or even entirely about a fungus. It's a story about a trade-off humanity keeps choosing, over and over again, across completely unrelated crops and centuries, mostly without noticing the bet even exists until it's already been lost once. And every time it's lost, the response tends to look the same too, a scramble for the fastest available fix, rather than a fundamental rethink of the system that created the vulnerability in the first place. Behind every statistic about market share and quarantine zones are real farmers whose entire livelihood depends on a fruit they didn't choose to make this fragile. In Colombia's La Guajira region, where TR4 was first confirmed in 2019, small and mid-sized banana growers, many running farms passed down through 2 or 3 generations, now face the very real possibility of losing their land's productive value entirely if infection spreads to their fields, with no compensation system in most cases capable of covering the true cost of that loss. Verify compensation and support programs available to affected Colombian farmers. For a farmer whose grandfather planted the same rows of Cavendish decades ago, a positive TR4 test on their land isn't just a business setback. It can mean the land itself becomes unsuitable for the only crop the family has ever known how to grow profitably, sometimes for a generation or longer, since the fungus persists in soil long after infected plants are removed. Across the Philippines, One of the world's largest banana exporters, smallholder farmers who supply major export companies have already dealt with TR4 outbreaks for years longer than Latin America has, some having watched entire family plots become unusable for banana cultivation for a full generation. Since the fungus can persist dangerously in contaminated soil for decades after infected plants are destroyed, verify specific Philippine outbreak history and duration. Cooperative associations representing thousands of small Filipino growers have spent years lobbying for stronger government support, disease-resistant planting material, and financial assistance for farmers forced to abandon infected land, support that arrives, by most accounts, far slower than the disease itself spreads. Verified details of Philippine government support programs. Plantation workers, who depend on steady seasonal harvesting and packing work, face an even more immediate risk, since a farm forced to abandon banana cultivation due to infection often has no equivalent crop able to generate comparable employment at the same scale. A single mid-sized banana farm can employ dozens of pickers, packers, and irrigation workers year-round, and when that farm shuts down, those jobs simply disappear from a local economy that may have no other major employer nearby to absorb them. This isn't an abstract market disruption playing out in boardrooms and trade reports. It's families in rural Colombia and the Philippines watching a fungus slowly move closer to their specific fields, year after year, with limited tools available to stop it and few good options if it arrives. The corporations at the top of this industry can diversify into other crops, other regions, other countries entirely if Cavendish production becomes unreliable in one place. A farmer whose family has grown bananas on the same land for 3 generations often cannot, and for many of these growers, the closest comparison isn't a distant business headline. It's the same feeling Gros Michel farmers must have felt decades earlier, watching a disease with no name and no cure slowly work its way toward everything they built their lives around, except this time, with satellite monitoring and international research funding, at least the world is watching it happen in real time instead of discovering the damage only after it was already done. Picture someone tonight, somewhere completely ordinary, peeling a banana for breakfast, tossing the peel in the trash without a single thought about where it came from or what it took to get there. They have no idea they're eating a clone, propagated from cuttings for thousands of years, no seeds, no natural genetic defense against whatever comes next. They have no idea that a nearly identical banana once dominated the entire world before quietly going commercially extinct within a single generation, disappearing so completely that most people alive today have never once tasted it. They almost certainly have no idea that a strike over basic labor rights once ended in gunfire in a Colombian town square, over the same fruit sitting in their hand, or that a private army once overthrew a government just to protect the company selling it. None of that history is visible in a bunch of bananas sitting in a grocery store display, priced at a few cents each, wrapped in nothing more than a small sticker with a smiling logo. That's the strange, quiet trick this fruit has always pulled off. It carries a hidden century of coups, massacres, corporate empires, and a global agricultural gamble still not fully resolved, disguised completely as the most boring, ordinary item in anyone's kitchen. Somewhere between the plantation and the produce aisle, a century of history gets peeled away and thrown out along with the skin. The banana almost didn't survive the last time this crisis happened. Whether it survives the next one is still, genuinely, being decided right now. In soil most of us will never see, on farms most of us will never visit, by people whose names will likely never appear in a single grocery store advertisement. Every disease-resistant fix in this story eventually turned out to be temporary, a pause button, not a permanent solution, and TR4 is proof the clock never actually stopped running after Gros Michel disappeared. It just started over, quietly, in soil nobody was watching closely enough. So here's a genuinely personal question for you. If the banana you know today eventually disappeared the same way Gros Michel did, and got replaced by something with a slightly different taste and texture, do you think most people would even notice? Or would they simply accept whatever came next as normal? The same way an entire generation already forgot Gros Michel ever existed at all? Drop your honest answer in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious how many people even knew there used to be a completely different banana before this one. And if uncovering the hidden history buried inside something as ordinary as a piece of fruit is exactly the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe, because this channel digs up a hidden history exactly like this one, buried inside something completely ordinary every single week. Coups, diseases, empires, and clones, all hiding behind a peel. And this is only the beginning of what's sitting quietly in your kitchen waiting to be uncovered.